The banquet hall glittered with gold light, crystal glasses, and carefully rehearsed smiles. Noble families filled the long tables beneath the vaulted ceiling, while servants moved quietly between them, carrying wine that hadn't yet been poured. Tonight was supposed to unite two powerful bloodlines. Celine Virel stood at the center platform beside Alpha Valor Dane, dressed in silver ceremonial silk, with the engagement crest pinned at her shoulder. Across from them, council elders waited beside the bond flame. One vow, one ring, one toast afterward. That was the plan. Then Valor spoke. "I can't complete this bond." Silence crashed across the hall instantly. Music stopped mid-note. A servant nearly dropped an entire tray of glasses. Celine didn't move. For 1 second, nobody seemed to understand what they'd heard. Then Valor removed the engagement ring from her finger, slowly, deliberately, and placed it on the ceremonial table between them. His mother stood immediately. Valor. Warning, shock, humiliation, all hidden inside a single word, but Valor barely looked at her. "I already made my decision," he said. Whispers exploded throughout the banquet hall. "He's ending it publicly? During the ceremony? What about the alliance?" Celine finally looked down at the ring resting on the table, then back at him. "That's your final decision?" "Yes." No hesitation. That hurt more than anger would have. Near the front row, a woman stepped quietly closer to Valor's side. Beautiful, confident, too comfortable standing there. Celine noticed immediately. So did half the room. Her gaze shifted back to Valor calmly. "There's someone else." Valor didn't deny it. Another silence fell. Heavy this time. The entire hall waited for Celine to react, cry, shout, break something. Instead, she stepped backward away from the engagement platform. "Understood," she said softly. Valor exhaled like he expected relief afterward. That was his mistake. Because Celine didn't argue, didn't beg, didn't stay. She turned calmly and walked down the marble steps alone while whispers followed her across the hall, and not a single person moved to stop her, not even the man who just lost her. The whispers grew louder the farther Celine walked from the engagement platform. She didn't even fight him. Did he really leave her for that woman? What happens to the alliance now? Celine ignored every word. The marble floor beneath her heels echoed sharply through the banquet hall, while nobles turned openly in their seats to watch her leave. No dignity left in pretending otherwise. At the center platform, Valor had already resumed speaking quietly with council members, like the engagement he destroyed was merely another political inconvenience. That part almost made her stop. Almost. Instead, she kept walking. A servant hurried toward her near the lower staircase. "My lady, your carriage is being prepared." "No carriage," the servant blinked in confusion. "But it's storming outside." Celine glanced toward the tall palace windows where rain slammed violently against the glass. "I noticed." Another servant approached nervously. "Should we call guards to escort you?" "No." "But..." "I said no." They fell silent immediately. Not because she raised her voice, because she never did. That made the humiliation sharper somehow. Behind her, another wave of murmuring spread suddenly through the hall. Celine didn't turn around, but she heard Valor clearly. "She'll calm down." The words reached her easily across the room. Casual, dismissive, certain. Like this was temporary, like she would return once her emotions settled. Celine stood still for one brief second near the palace entrance, then continued walking. Outside, thunder cracked violently overhead the moment the massive palace doors opened. Cold rain hit instantly. Sharp, freezing, real. For the first time all evening, Celine could finally breathe properly. Inside the banquet hall, Alpha King Rhaegor Vale watched the palace entrance long after she disappeared through it. One of the council elders exhaled heavily. "This ceremony is becoming disastrous." Valor grabbed a glass from a servant's tray. "It's handled." Rhaegor finally looked at him. "Handled?" Valor drank without concern. "She needs time." To what? Adjust. That single word shifted something cold across Rhaegor's expression. You broke your engagement publicly, he said evenly, then sent her into a storm alone. Vaelor looked unimpressed. This doesn't concern you. Rhaegor slowly set his untouched drink onto the banquet table. It does now. Vaelor straightened immediately. Don't. Rhaegor ignored him completely, then turned toward the palace doors and walked out after her. Rain hammered the palace roads hard enough to blur the lantern lights. Selene walked quickly through the storm, silver ceremonial fabric soaked heavily against her skin, while thunder rolled across the dark sky above the capital. She didn't know where she was going yet, only that she refused to stay. Behind her, the palace still glowed with music, wealth, and humiliation. Ahead, silence. For several minutes, only the sound of rain followed her footsteps. Then another sound appeared. Heavy boots against wet stone, measured, steady, closing distance. Selene slowed slightly but didn't turn immediately. The footsteps stopped a few feet behind her. Then a voice cut through the rain. Selene, not Vaelor. That alone made her turn. Rhaegor Vale stood beneath the storm without an umbrella or escort, black coat drenched completely as rainwater ran down the sharp angles of his face. He looked entirely unbothered by it. Selene frowned slightly. Why are you here? You left. That tends to happen after broken engagements. His expression almost shifted at that. Almost. You left alone, he corrected calmly. And that was his second mistake tonight. Lightning flashed briefly across the road between them. Selene crossed her arms against the cold. If you came to offer sympathy, save it. I didn't. Good. Rhaegor stepped closer slowly, boots splashing through shallow rainwater. I came because everyone inside watched you walk away, he said. But nobody followed. Selene held his gaze evenly. Except you. Yes. The simplicity of the answer unsettled her more than comfort would have. Rain poured harder around them. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Selene asked quietly, why attend the engagement at all? Rhaegor looked back toward the glowing palace behind them. Political obligation. That's not the real answer. No, he agreed. Silence stretched briefly. Then, I came to watch Vaelor Dane make a mistake. Selene almost laughed despite herself. Confident. Accurate. That confidence should have annoyed her. Instead, it sounded strangely honest. Rhaegor studied her carefully afterward. He thought silence meant acceptance. Selene's gaze sharpened slightly, because he understood faster than anyone else had. Rhaegor continued quietly. Men like Vaelor mistake loyalty for permanence. That landed harder than expected. Not because it hurt, because it was true. And for the first time tonight, someone finally said it out loud. The rain eased slightly as they continued walking through the lower palace roads. Not enough to stop, just enough that the silence between them no longer sounded drowned. Selene kept her eyes ahead. You speak like you know him well. Rhaegor walked beside her evenly. I know ambitious men well. That wasn't what I asked. A faint pause. Then he answered honestly. Vaelor values control more than people. Selene almost smiled bitterly at that. You reached that conclusion quickly. I reached it years ago. Thunder rumbled quietly overhead. They passed empty market streets and shuttered stone shops, while palace guards stationed along the lower district pretended not to stare at the Alpha King, walking beside a newly abandoned fiancé in the middle of a storm. Nobody interrupted them. Nobody dared. Selene finally looked at him directly. You disliked this engagement. Yes. Because of politics? Because of him. That answer surprised her enough to stop walking briefly. Rhaegor stopped too. Rainwater dripped slowly from the dark strands of hair across his forehead as he looked at her calmly. You think I'm exaggerating, he said. I think powerful men enjoy criticizing each other. A low sound, almost like amusement, escaped him. Usually. And this time, This time, he said evenly, I watched him discard someone loyal because he assumed she'd remain loyal afterward. Silence settled between them again. Selene looked away first, because that part hurt. Not the broken engagement, not even the humiliation, the certainty behind it. Valor truly believed she would stay no matter how publicly he embarrassed her. Rhaegor noticed the shift in her expression immediately. He expected forgiveness before you even left the platform, he said quietly. Selene exhaled once slowly. I stayed too long. That's not weakness. No, Rhaegor replied. It's what men like him rename loyalty when it becomes convenient. That landed hard enough to stop her breathing for half a second, because suddenly the entire evening looked different. The compromises, the excuses, the waiting, all the moments she convinced herself patience would eventually become respect. Rhaegor glanced toward the palace lights in the distance. Silence isn't forgiveness. Selene followed his gaze quietly. Behind them, the banquet still continued, as if nothing important had been destroyed inside it. Then Rhaegor looked back at her. And walking away silently, he added, doesn't mean you lost. For the first time all night, Selene believed that might actually be true. When Selena realized they were heading back toward the palace, she stopped walking immediately. Rhaegor took another step before noticing. You're turning around, she said. Yes. No. Rainwater dripped from the edge of her sleeves as she folded her arms tighter. I already left once. And? I'm not walking back into that hall just so everyone can stare at me again. Rhaegor's expression remained unreadable. They already are. That doesn't help. No, he agreed calmly. But unfinished things irritate me. Selene stared at him. You're impossible. I've heard that before. Lightning flashed overhead as the palace rose ahead of them again, glowing gold against the dark storm clouds. Selene frowned slightly. Why do you care so much about this? Rhaegor looked at her directly. Because men like Valor rely on quiet exits. A pause. Quiet exits protect their reputation. That landed immediately. Selene looked away first, because he was right. If she disappeared silently tonight, the story would become simple by morning. Valor ended an engagement responsibly. Selene accepted it gracefully. Politics continued untouched. No consequence. Rhaegor stepped closer slightly. You don't owe him comfort after public humiliation. The palace guards near the entrance noticed them approaching and instantly straightened in alarm. More specifically, they noticed who Selene was walking beside. One guard hurried to open the massive banquet doors. The moment they stepped inside, the entire hall fell silent again. Every noble turned immediately. Conversations died mid-sentence. A glass shattered somewhere near the back tables, because Selene Varel had returned, and beside her walked Alpha King Rhaegor Vale. Valor straightened sharply near the engagement platform. Selene? She ignored him completely. Instead, her eyes moved toward the ceremonial table at the center of the hall. The engagement ring still sat there exactly where Valor left it, untouched, discarded, waiting. Selene walked directly toward it through rows of silent nobles. Rhaegor followed beside her without speaking. Valor stepped forward carefully. You came back. Selena picked up the ring slowly from the table. Cold metal, empty promise. Then she looked at Valor calmly. You should keep this, she said, and placed the ring directly into his hand. The hall held its breath. Selena's voice remained perfectly steady. You gave it up too easily. Valor froze, because somehow that hurt worse than anger would have. The engagement ring sat in Valor's palm like something suddenly unfamiliar. Heavy, sharp, dangerous. The banquet hall remained completely silent around him. Selene stepped back after returning it, her soaked silver sleeves dripping rainwater onto the marble floor between them. Valor finally found his voice. You're making this dramatic. A soft sound escaped Rhaegor beside her. Not surprise, amusement. Selene noticed immediately. That's your defense? Vylor's expression tightened. I'm trying to prevent this from becoming worse. You ended our engagement before the first toast. That was necessary. In front of the entire territory. Vylor exhaled sharply like she was missing the point. Selene, no, she interrupted calmly. You don't get to soften it now. The nobles around them shifted nervously, because she was right. Public humiliation didn't become private simply because Vylor regretted how it looked afterward. Rhaegor stepped forward then, not aggressively, just enough to shift the room's attention fully toward him. You ended your engagement publicly, he said evenly to Vylor. So let's continue publicly. Vylor's jaw hardened immediately. This still doesn't concern you. Rhaegor's expression remained coldly composed. It concerned me the moment you discarded her like an inconvenience. That's not what happened. Then explain it differently. Vylor opened his mouth. Nothing came out immediately. Another mistake. The silence stretched too long. Selene watched realization spread slowly across the faces in the room. People were beginning to understand something important. Vylor had no better explanation. He chose someone else, publicly, carelessly, and assumed Selene would quietly survive the embarrassment afterward. Rhaegor looked at him evenly. You mistook loyalty for permission. The words landed hard enough to silence even the council elders. Vylor snapped back instantly. Careful. Rhaegor ignored the warning completely. Then, in front of the entire banquet hall, he stepped beside Selene, close enough that every noble understood exactly what it meant. Vylor noticed too. Don't. Rhaegor looked at him calmly. Too late. The atmosphere in the hall shifted violently, because suddenly this wasn't only a broken engagement anymore. It was territorial, political, personal. Vylor's voice sharpened. She belongs here. Selene answered before Rhaegor could. No, she said quietly. Then Rhaegor spoke the line that shattered what remained of the evening. She leaves with me. The hall erupted instantly. Voices exploded across the banquet hall instantly. You can't be serious? An Alpha King taking another territory's former fiancé? This will become a political disaster. Council elders stood from their seats while nobles whispered openly now, abandoning all attempts at discretion. At the center of it all, Vylor stared at Rhaegor like he'd finally crossed a line too visible to ignore. You don't get involved in this, he said coldly. Rhaegor barely looked at him. You involved everyone the second you humiliated her publicly. Vylor stepped closer. She's still part of my territory. Selene answered immediately. Not for much longer. That hit harder than expected. Vylor turned toward her sharply. You're overreacting. A low laugh escaped Rhaegor beside her. Short, disbelieving. Selene noticed. Interesting timing to call me emotional after ending our engagement in front of an audience. Vylor's jaw tightened. I made a difficult decision. No, Selene corrected calmly. You made a selfish one. The room went silent again, because nobody spoke to Vylor Dane like that publicly. Not anymore. Not until tonight. Vylor lowered his voice. You're angry. Yes. At me. Yes. Then stop letting him manipulate this. Rhaegor finally looked directly at him. You think too highly of your importance. Vylor ignored him completely. Selene, come back upstairs. We'll discuss this privately. That almost made her laugh. Now you want privacy? His silence answered enough. Selene looked at him carefully then. Really looked. And for the first time in years, she realized something important. Vylor wasn't trying to fix the relationship. He was trying to fix the damage. To his reputation. To the alliance. To the room watching him lose control of the situation publicly. Rhaegor noticed the exact moment she understood. You see it now, he said quietly beside her. Selene nodded once. Valor's expression darkened instantly. Don't. But it was already too late. Selene looked at him steadily. You thought I'd stay after this. You would have, he replied, before thinking. The silence afterward was catastrophic. Even Valor realized his mistake immediately, because that single sentence exposed everything. The certainty, the arrogance, the assumption that she would endure anything quietly as long as he decided it. Selene stepped backward slowly, away from him. I'm not leaving with him, she said softly. Hope flickered briefly across Valor's face. Then she finished. I'm leaving because of you. And that destroyed whatever defense he had left. No one tried to stop them this time. Not the council, not the guards, not even Valor. The banquet hall remained frozen in silence as Selene turned away from the shattered engagement platform for the second time that night. But this walk felt different. The first time, she left humiliated. Now, she left decided. Rhaegor moved beside her as they crossed the marble floor together. Not ahead, not possessively close, beside, equal pace, equal presence. The nobles parted automatically to make room for them. Whispers followed instantly. She's actually leaving. With him. Valor completely lost control of this. At the front of the hall, Valor finally moved forward again. Selene. She didn't stop walking. That seemed to affect him more than anger would have. Selene, he repeated sharply. This time she paused near the banquet doors but didn't turn around. The entire hall waited. Valor stepped closer carefully now, like sudden movements might make things worse. Think about what this looks like. Selene almost smiled at that, because somehow, even now, he still thought reputation mattered more than what he'd done to her. Slowly, she turned her head just enough to glance at him over her shoulder. You should have thought about that before humiliating me publicly. Valor's expression tightened immediately. That's not fair, Rhaegor answered before she could. Neither was tonight. Silence dropped again. Valor looked at Rhaegor with open frustration now. You planned this. No, Rhaegor replied calmly. You did. That landed hard enough to shut down every remaining whisper in the room, because everyone understood exactly what he meant. Rhaegor didn't create this disaster. He simply stepped into the space Valor destroyed himself. Selene pushed open the massive banquet doors. Cold wind swept inside instantly, carrying the scent of rain and thunder through the hall. Outside, the storm had weakened to a steady drizzle. Behind her, Valor spoke one final time. If you leave now, he said quietly, everything changes. Selene faced forward again toward the dark palace courtyard ahead. Yes, she answered softly. That's the point. Then she walked out into the storm beside the Alpha King. And for the first time all evening, nobody in the banquet hall looked at her like the abandoned woman anymore. They looked at her like the turning point Valor Dane never saw coming. The palace doors closed behind them with a heavy echo. Inside, the banquet hall erupted instantly into chaos. Outside, only rain remained. Selene walked down the palace steps slowly this time, the storm cooling the last heat of humiliation from her skin, while distant thunder rolled across the dark mountains surrounding the territory. Beside her, Rhaegor remained silent for several moments, giving her space. That alone felt unfamiliar. Most powerful men filled silence immediately, controlled it, used it. Rhaegor simply walked beside her while rainwater slid from the edges of his black coat. At the bottom of the palace stairs, he finally asked, "Where now?" Selene looked ahead at the empty roads stretching beyond the palace gates. "Anywhere that isn't behind me." A faint pause, then Rhaegor nodded once. Good answer. They continued forward together across the wet stone courtyard, while guards along the outer walls avoided direct eye contact completely. Nobody wanted to become involved in whatever tonight had become. Halfway to the gates, The palace doors burst open again behind them. Celine! Valor. Finally. Too late. She stopped walking briefly when she heard his voice, but she didn't turn around. Rhaegor stopped beside her, gaze shifting calmly toward the palace stairs where Valor stood in the rain without ceremony or escort for the first time all night. The sight alone felt strange, less like an alpha, more like a man realizing control had slipped too far to recover. Valor stepped forward into the storm. "Don't do this." Celine's expression barely changed. "You already did." "That's not what I meant." "No," she said softly. "It's exactly what you meant." Rain hit harder between them. Valor looked past her briefly toward Rhaegor. "You're really leaving with him?" This time Celine finally turned slightly. Not enough to face him fully. Enough to answer. "I'm leaving because you made staying impossible." The words landed visibly. Valor's expression shifted for the first time all evening. Not anger, not arrogance. Loss, real loss. But even now, Celine felt nothing pulling her backward anymore. Rhaegor glanced toward the open palace gates behind Valor. "You should go back inside." Valor ignored him completely. "Celine?" "No," she interrupted quietly. Then she looked forward again and started walking. Rhaegor matched her pace immediately. Behind them, Valor remained standing alone beneath the palace lights, while the storm swallowed the distance between them slowly. Celine never looked back again, and this time, neither did the Alpha King beside her.